Hey guys, I'm Saurav, and in this video we will be talking about editing portraits. Now for this video tutorial I will be using Photoshop and Lightroom both. First what we are going to do is we are going to use the raw file, take it into Lightroom and make some basic color corrections and contrast to make the raw file look better. Then we are going to take the image from Lightroom to Photoshop and use some advanced image editing techniques to give it a final touch up. This video is a bit lengthy video, but I hope you will understand because everything is explained in depth. So without wasting any time, let's get started.
So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my clipping marks. So when I'm editing the photo, I just have a good feedback if I'm overexposing or underexposing anything. The second thing I'm going to do is, and I'm going to get rid of the lens corrections first. So I will enable my profile corrections and chromatic aberration. Now distortion, it's on you. How much of the distortion do you want? Okay, it is your choice. If you like the distortion, you can go with it, or you can remove the distortion if you don't like it. So starting with the first panel, that is the basic panel. First, I can see the shot can be like, could have been a bit more overexposed. So I'll just overexpose the shot by just a bit, like 0.4. I think that looks great right now. Just remember, when you're overexposing or underexposing, okay, you're not actually making anything like blue or red, okay, then you're losing all the details. So unless and until you're crossing the boundaries of the histogram, you're good to go. So we are just going to go with 0.45 or 0.4. I think 0.45 looks good. Now for the highlights, I normally, when I'm editing my landscape images, I will reduce the highlights for that dramatic sky. But for portraits, it doesn't look good. If you see, it takes that glow from that face. So I'm going to increase my highlights just a bit, just about plus 15. And shadows will actually take care of this part because this is particularly midtones. So when I increase the shadows, if you see, I get more details from the hair part. So I'm going to increase my shadows just up to, like, again, plus 15 looks great. Depends on you. If you want to increase the shadows a bit more, you can do that. But if you go crazy with it, you will get this fake look, which you don't want. You have to preserve the skin tone, the colors, right? You have to preserve the texture. So don't go crazy with it. Then I'm going to edit my whites. I'm going to hold Alt and I'm going to drag the whites till I see any white point. So just about plus 44 looks good. Then I will do my black parts. So as I go with black, if you see, just there, right? You can bring a bit of blacks if you want, that is your choice. But right now, if I see the shot looks good, just with certain basic editing, if you see, yeah, the shot looks good. Now I'm going to see the clarity slider is like a very important slider in any form of editing. You can increase the clarity, you can decrease the clarity. The thing is, when you're editing portraits and when you increase the shadows, as I said, it already gives this HDR effect. So to nullify that HDR effect, to get a more natural look, I'm going to actually decrease the clarity. Just minus -5 or -10 would do. And this is not a rule for portrait photography, like for editing portraits. There are some portraits where you might like the look you are going for and then you might increase the clarity, but this is the look I'm going for and I don't want any kind of like HDR look. I want a very natural look. Then comes vibrance and saturation. So if you have watched my previous videos regarding editing, you might know that I don't like the saturation because it like gives these fake colors, but I love vibrance. You know, even if you increase it to plus 100, you will see the colors don't look fake. It's a very subtle way of increasing the intensity of the colors. So I will just go till about positive 40. If you see, even if positive, I go to positive 40, still I get good, I get those colors from the skin tone, but at the same time, I'm also getting those natural colors. The next thing I'm going for is the tone curve, okay? So I will just again turn on the clipping. Now, when I'm going for the tone curve, you know, I want to actually increase my brights and decrease my darks, okay? I'm doing it purposely so much so that you understand. But I exactly want this particular part to be brighter and this particular part to be darker. So how do I know exactly which point in the graph it is? So for that, I'm going to click here and then I'm going to zoom to my image. and right here. If you're wondering about this image was taken last week when I have collaborated with Harshala for a portrait photography tutorial. So that video is going to come next week. Coming back to the editing point, so as you see, I just selected this and I selected the highlights part. Same way I'm going to do with my shadows. I'm going to select this and I'm going to decrease this. The blue parts you see are complete black. So if you just turn on off the clipping like this, that will go. And if you don't want that much amount of blacks, you can always go ahead and get rid of it. Depends on you, or you can leave it. Depends on you. If you want the details from that, you will go ahead with it or you won't. Okay, so once I'm happy with it, if you see the tone curve, just the tone curve makes a hell of a difference. We spent like about 30 to 40 seconds with the tone curve, and as you can see, we are already making some difference. Then the HSL panel, I'm not going to play much with the HSL panel. One thing I like to do is, if you think you want the model to look a bit fairer or darker, whatever you want, you can always go to the luminance and select the color you want to increase, and you can go with increase or decrease. Okay, I'm just doing it more so that you understand exactly the effect of it. Okay, so I don't think this photo needs it, but you can still go ahead and do a bit, just about 0.5, and if I turn it on and off, you can see just a bit of a difference, but looks good. So then I'm going to go to the detail panel, and every time I go to the detail panel, I see my shot EXIF. Okay, so this was shot at 1/500th of a second at 190 mm at f2.8 ISO 100. So the important thing here is ISO 100. So since this was shot at ISO 100, one thing for sure is this shot is going to have very less noise. Okay, this shot will have a bit of noise just because you have increased the exposure. So it will introduce a bit of noise. So we will take care of that too. So just because you're shooting at ISO 100 doesn't mean you can go crazy with the sharpening, because you have also increased the exposure and introduced some noise. Ideally, this shot should have been shot at ISO 200 or somewhere between ISO 200 or 400. But you can always fix that in post, but try to get it right in camera. So I'm clicking this particular small icon and I'm going to focus on the eye. So the eye is in perfect focus. We are going to take care of the sharpening. So no rocket science if you increase the sharpening amount. As you can see, just focus right here. As you can see, the sharpening is increasing, right? So I'm going to go with sharpening at about plus 80. I think that works fine. And then I'm going to go with luminance of about 20 to 25. And then now the thing is, whatever, if you see, if you just go ahead here and if you turn on the sharpening, you see the image looks a bit sharper right now. Obviously, I don't know if you can see the difference in the screen recording, but I can obviously tell the difference right now. But now the problem is, if I hold Alt and if I click here on the masking one, everything is going to be white, and I don't want everything to be white. Okay, if I push this slider, as you can see, everything like kinds of starts getting black. So the point is, the things which are in white are getting sharpened, the things which are in black are not, okay, as usual. So I just want my model to be sharpened and not the rest of the things. So I'm just going to go with positive 20. So that's going to give me a nice look. If you see, I have taken care of the noise as well, but at the same time, the image is also sharper than before. So the detail panel is again used for that. We have already dealt with the lens correction. So we are not going to play with the transform here. We are going to play with the effects panel right here. So vignetting is something that looks good. And like most of the times I'll go with the vignette just because I want to grab the attention of the viewers to the center of the image and not to the rest of the part. So now for vignetting, I will go till -100. Now, okay, I know it's too much, but believe me, this is a technique I use for getting the perfect vignette I want. Okay, then I will increase my feather to positive 100, because if it is 0, it looks fake. So I'm going to increase it to positive 100. Now I want to adjust my midpoint. This is the point I was telling why I do it till -100. So midpoint, as you can decrease or increase, you can see which of the parts are getting darker. Okay, so now we are increasing the midpoint, and the aim is to not make the subject darker. So at about 70, I think it looks good. Now I'm going to reduce my vignette, reduce the amount of vignette applied, just about -20. So if you can see, the corners get darker, but at the same time the model is saved. Maybe I can use -25 as well. So yeah, that looks good. So if you see, just with like few minutes of editing, we have actually made the image look a lot better. There's certain things which Lightroom does better, and there's certain things which Photoshop does better. So I'll actually switch back to Photoshop right now. One thing before doing that is I'll make the model. You can either go with making this part a bit brighter, like depending on which part you want to focus on. What I will actually do is I'll actually make the rest of the part a bit darker, because I think this part already looks great. If I increase the exposure, it will look bad. So I'll just click on invert. I will make sure it's not ticked, because if I click on invert, everything inside that shape will get affected, but I want everything outside that shape to be affected. So once I untick the invert, then I'm going to reduce my exposure just a bit, like about -0.15 to -0.17. Yeah. So now the thing is, I'm going to increase this shape size, so just to make sure the model doesn't get affected. So since the feather is 100, the model will get affected a bit, so I'm going to reduce my feather a bit. Yeah, now I think it looks good. You can still go with 65 and just, yeah, now I think the model doesn't get affected, but the rest of the image is pretty well darkened. Okay, so now the Lightroom part is done. You can see the before and after right here, right? So if you zoom in the face, you see it's a lot more sharper looks. The exposure is corrected. We get more colors because of course we have shot in RAW. We have that flexibility for editing the image. Now we are going to take the same image in this form in Photoshop. So in Photoshop, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take care of the skin. So I'm going to remove this particular parts of the skin. Now it's not necessary to do that. It depends on you, and it depends on what kind of results you're going for. I'm going to do this because I think it's a bit irregular when it comes to skin. So I'm just going to create a new layer and name it healing. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with the spot healing brush tool. So, and then I'm going to reduce my brush size, and then I'm going to just click here. If you see, that's kind of magical, right? You can get rid of irregularities. And suppose, one thing is, like, suppose you want to remove this particular part, okay, and it's not behaving properly. In this case it is, because the skin is very even. Then you can also use the clone stamp tool and select a particular part, and then you can go with the sampling. Now it doesn't look good in this situation, but in certain complex situations where you have a very complex background or a complex texture, spot healing brush tool will not do the job very good. So clone stamp tool will actually do a better job. But for this, the spot healing brush tool does an excellent job. So as you can see, yeah, we have removed this part. You won't be able to tell that we have did it. Actually, it looks very, very natural. One thing is, actually like this hair, if you want to remove that too, you can also get rid of that. Again, we are using spot healing brush tool. Okay, you have to just make sure, okay, you have to just make sure you don't lose any texture from the skin. Okay, I'm just going to reduce my brush size, and yeah, I think that looks good. So just with the healing tool, I have removed the parts I didn't want in the skin. Then I'll press Alt Shift Control A to make a separate layer that combines all the editing that I've done before. And then I'm going to use Google Nik. Now this is actually the free Google Nik software that used to come before. I haven't upgraded to the latest Nik by DxO, but I think the Google Nik that used to be available previously is also brilliant software. I'm going to upgrade to the latest DxO very soon. So now in Google Nick, you have a lot of presets already. So once I'm in the portrait panel, you get a lot of different options. Okay. It's not necessary that you only have to use these options. There are different options from landscape, wedding, architecture, nature, travel. There are different options, and some of the options overlap too. Depends on what kind of result do you want to go with. So for the pro contrast, I love this pro contrast option. I'm just going to increase my dynamic contrast a bit. And as you can see, the dynamic contrast makes the image look a bit more like, it brings that pop you want in the image. The second thing I'm going to do is increase my correct contrast. So it's going to just, like darken the shadows a bit, increase the highlights. Of course, what contrast does, and it's going to give me more contrast. But at the same time, just don't go crazy with it. You don't want the fake look. The image already was looking good in Lightroom, but with some more advanced features like the advanced contrast and healing, we're trying to get a better look. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the classical soft focus. So as you can see, that adds this soft look to the portrait image. Now this is not a general rule. Again, I'm going for that softer look. That's why I'm going for this effect. If you're not, you won't use it. So I'm just going to turn on this so I know what highlights I'm going to clip. Of course, I'm not going to use it this much, just about positive 20. So yeah, the positive 20 looks too strong. Positive 15 looks good. So if you see, it gives that soft glow that you want, right? It makes the shadows look a bit more natural. Then I'm going to go with dynamic skin softener. Now there are very advanced Photoshop retouching techniques where you can, fix the skin, make the skin look very, very good. Now I'm not saying this is as advanced as this, but for beginners right now, this option is a very good option. It's very easy to use, and it also gives very, very good looking results. So the first thing is I'm going to reduce all the details. Okay, before that, let's select the skin color. So I'll select this and I will select the skin color. Now the thing is, if I reduce all the details, you won't be seeing any difference. If I turn this on and off, you won't be seeing any difference because I've not actually played with the details. Now I'm going to do that. So when I change my large details, if you see, yeah, every detail panel, actually detail slider, deals with different details of the images, but the large details actually deal with the larger details. Obviously, to explain, and I'll just keep this to positive 100 and 0 so that you will understand what's exactly getting affected. So I'll just use positive 10 for it. Just positive 7 looks good to me. Again, don't go crazy with it. Medium details is going to be the much stronger part because this face texture contains a lot of medium details in it. So I'll just go with just about positive 5, and small details, I'll again just go with positive 5. So if you see, we have actually reduced the amount a lot, but still the effect is very, very prominent. Okay, but the thing is, now the skin looks fake. Okay, it looks very, very fake. It is very obvious that you have edited and retouched the skin. It should not be that obvious. Okay, so I'm going to reduce the opacity again of this particular dynamic skin softener layer to about 55 or 60%. So what I'm doing is I'm again fixing the skin, but not up to like positive 100 to get that fake look, but just reducing it about 60 to 70 to get a good natural look. So now we have added some contrast, we have added some soft focus, we have added some skin softening. One thing you can do is you can also add glamour glow. It just takes away the saturation a bit. If you don't like that, you can go ahead and keep the saturation at 0, but it gives that subtle glow that you want in the image. The last thing I'm going to use is the skylight filter. Now the thing is, if I increase the skylight filter strength just a bit, like about 50, you see that these parts are not getting as much affected as a warmer skin tone, okay, warmer parts of the image. So skylight filters, what it does is basically takes the warmer tones and make it a bit more brighter. So what skylight filter does is it basically takes the warmer parts of the image and makes it a bit more warmer. Okay, so I'm going for a bit, just a slight warm look. So I'm going to go with +5. I think +5 looks good. it gives that warm skin tone, but at the same time it's not looking fake. So I'm just going to press OK and save my image. So now as you can see, with the Color Effects Pro 4 layer, we have added that contrast. The colors look a bit better, the contrast is improved, and overall the image looks better. Maybe I can go with a curves adjustment layer. One thing again is you can select this particular part and increase the contrast. I'm going for slightly more contrast in this image. Now again, in Photoshop you have a lot of things to play with. If you want to play with the saturation, the hues, you have all the options in Lightroom and Photoshop as well. You can actually play with it a lot. I'm just going to decrease the saturation a bit because I think the saturation is a tad increased when I was editing the photo, and that can happen, but you have all the options in Photoshop you want. It's a very advanced software, but for this tutorial I'm sticking to the basics just because this tutorial is aimed for beginners. Now I will show you the before and after of this particular editing tutorial.
I hope you enjoyed the portrait editing tutorial. Next week, the portrait photography tutorial is going to be uploaded on the channel, so stay tuned for that. If you liked the video, press the like button. If you loved it, press the subscribe button if you haven't already. And I will talk to you guys in the next one. Bye.